Hi, this is longevity physician Dr. David Barzilai. I hope you enjoy this AI presentation.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready to explore something kinda mind-blowing. We're going deep on the quest to actually slow down aging.
And not just like anti-aging creams, right? We're talking about serious science.
Oh yeah, we're diving into cutting-edge research from these leading scientists, S.J. Olshansky and Matt Kaberlin. They're looking at how we might not just live longer, but actually stretch out those healthy, vibrant years.
Which, let's be honest, is what we all really want, right? Who
Yeah,
wants to just add years onto the end if they're not good years?
exactly. So think about it. What could you do with, say, an extra couple of decades of feeling your best?
Travel the world, finally write that novel, learn how to play the banjo.
Maybe master that whole time travel thing while we're at it.
Ha! Well, one step at a time. But that's what's so fascinating about these researchers' perspectives. They're really challenging how we think about health and longevity.
Right, because we usually focus on one disease at a time.
Mhm.
Heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's. Like each one is a separate battle.
And both Olshansky and Kaberlein are saying, hold on, what if those are just symptoms of a deeper process? Like, what if we're so busy fighting each individual weed, we've forgotten to tend to the whole garden?
I like that analogy. It's like fixing a leaky faucet in an old house. You patch one leak, another one pops up somewhere else.
Exactly. And Olshansky actually uses a car analogy to explain this. He says to imagine your car's warranty has expired. Those miles keep adding up, and suddenly it's not just one thing breaking down, it's everything.
Oh, I know that feeling all too well with my car. The check engine light is basically a permanent fixture on my dashboard at this point.
Right. And it's the same with our bodies as we age. It's not just one thing going wrong, it's that domino effect. Olshansky calls these competing causes. It's a bunch of age-related issues popping up all at once.
So multiple warning lights are flashing, and we can't just keep replacing parts forever. And that's where the limits of our current medical model, what Olshansky calls 20th century medicine, become clear, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we've made such progress treating individual diseases, but Karoline points to this really interesting data from the CDC. Even if we magically cured major killers like cancer and heart disease, it would only extend the average lifespan by a few years.
Seriously. Just a few
That
years.
seems to be the consensus.
Wow. Okay, so what's the alternative? We just accept that a few more years is all we can hope for.
Not necessarily. That's what's so exciting about this whole area of research. Because what if, instead of playing whack-a-mole with each disease, we could target the underlying process of aging itself?
Now, that would be a game changer. But is that even possible? Can we really slow down aging? That's a question, isn't it? Can we actually hit the brakes on aging?
And that's where geroscience comes in.
Geroscience. Okay, so we're getting into some sci-fi terminology now.
Well, it might sound futuristic, but it's a real field of study, and Kaberlein is one of its biggest proponents.
So what is it exactly? What are we talking about when we say geroscience?
It's all about shifting our focus. Instead of tackling individual diseases, geroscience looks at targeting the underlying mechanisms of aging itself.
Okay, so less about fighting each disease and more about figuring out how to make the body less susceptible to them in the first place.
Exactly. It's like imagine trying to stop weeds from growing. You could keep pulling them out one by one, or you could figure out how to make the soil inhospitable to them.
So geroscience is like changing the soil, not pulling the weeds.
Exactly. And this is where it gets really exciting. Because if we can actually slow down aging itself, we could prevent multiple age-related diseases all at once.
Okay, now that sounds almost too good to be true. So instead of just tacking on a few years like the CDC data suggests, we could be talking about adding decades of healthy life.
That's the hope. And there's actually some pretty compelling research out there. Kyberlin talks about these studies with a compound called
Rapamycin.
rapamycin. Yeah, so in these studies, rapamycin increased the lifespan of mice by, are you ready for this? 50%.
50%? Are you serious?
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And not only did they live longer, but they stayed healthier longer too. It delayed a whole bunch of age-related issues.
Okay, so sign me up, right? Where can I get my hands on some of this rapamycin?
Well, not so fast. As promising as these studies are, we have to remember that mice aren't humans.
Right, of course. What works for a tiny lab mouse might not translate to us more complex beings.
Right. There could be side effects we don't even know about yet. We need a lot more research, specifically clinical trials on humans, to figure out if it's safe and effective for us.
Okay, that makes sense. But still, the fact that we're even talking about the possibility of targeting aging itself is incredible.
It is. And it's important to remember we're not just talking about living longer. We're talking about extending those healthy, active years. Olshansky calls it Healthspan, not just lifespan.
Because who wants to live to 100 if they're miserable and bedridden for the last 20 years?
Precisely. Quality of life is key here. And Kaberlin talks about this really interesting concept called the compression of morbidity.
Compression of morbidity. Okay, that sounds a little intimidating.
It's actually a pretty straightforward idea. It basically means squeezing that period of illness and decline that often comes with aging into the shortest possible time frame.
So instead of a long, slow decline, it's like
Yeah.
a short, sharp dip at the very end.
Yes, exactly. And that's the beauty of targeting aging itself. We might be able to enjoy decades of healthy, active living and then have a very brief period of decline right at the end.
Wow, that would be incredible. But I'm sure it's not all smooth sailing from here, right? There must be challenges, ethical considerations, things like that. There must be some people a little wary of messing with something as fundamental as aging. Like, are we opening Pandora's box here?
It's a valid concern, for sure. This whole field has a bit of a checkered past. Right, Olshansky even talks about that, how there have always been those kind of shady characters promising immortality elixirs and stuff.
Oh yeah, the fountain of youth charlatans.
Exactly. But Olshansky and Kaberlin are both very clear that they're not talking about some kind of indefinite lifespan. The goal is to extend those healthy, high-functioning years. That's the whole point.
Because what's the point of living to 150 if you're 100 years past your prime? Yeah.
Right. And, it's not that different from what we already do, extending lifespans with things like vaccines and preventive medicine. This is just taking it a step further, aiming at the aging process itself.
I see your point. But even if we're just talking about extending the good years, isn't there a concern about, well, overpopulation? If suddenly everyone is living decades longer, wouldn't that put a huge strain on the planet?
It's something a lot of people bring up, and Olshansky actually did the math on it. He ran models to see what would happen to population growth with
What did
delayed
he
aging.
find?
He said that if we're talking about true immortality, yeah, that would have a major impact. But if it's a more realistic scenario, like adding a decade or two of healthy life, the effect on population is actually pretty minimal.
Huh, interesting. So it's not the ticking time bomb some people might imagine.
Not according to the projections. And it's important to remember, we're talking about extending those healthy, active years. Nobody is suggesting we indefinitely prolong the frail end of life.
Okay, that makes sense. But I have to admit, there's still this little voice in my head that worries, what if we slow down aging and people just end up frail and sick for longer?
I totally get that. It's like the last thing anyone wants is to just add years to their life but spend them needing constant care. And that's why both Olshansky and Kaberlin emphasize that quality of life has to be the top priority. Any intervention has to improve health span, not just lifespan.
So it's not about just adding years, it's about adding good years.
Exactly. Imagine instead of slowing down in your 60s and 70s, you're still hiking, traveling, learning new things, well into your 80s, 90s, maybe even beyond. That's the potential here.
That's a future I can get behind. But how do we get there? What are the next steps in this whole field?
Kaberlin seems really fired up about the research that's happening now with things like rapamycin. They all target different parts of the aging process, and the early research seems really promising.
Wow, it sounds like we're on the cusp of a whole new understanding of health and longevity.
And one of the most exciting developments is this thing called the TAMI trial.
TAM?
Yeah, it stands for Targeting Aging with Metformin. It's a big human trial that's looking at whether metformin, which is a drug they use for type 2 diabetes, they're seeing if it can actually delay age-related diseases in humans.
That's amazing. So we could be seeing real results in our lifetime.
It's definitely possible. And, even studying aging in dogs, like in Kaberlin's dog aging project, is yielding some really interesting findings. Man's best friend might be paving the way for some of these breakthroughs.
Wow, so much to be hopeful for. So to wrap things up, it sounds like we've learned that traditional medicine, while amazing in many ways, is hitting a wall when it comes to extending those healthy, vibrant years. But geroscience is offering a whole new approach by going after the root cause, aging itself.
Absolutely. And it's not just about living longer. It's about living better for longer, which I think begs a bigger question. If we can really do this, if you can slow down aging safely and effectively, what does that mean for us as a society? How will it change how we live our lives, plan for the future, even just think about what it means to be human?
It's a big question, and honestly, I don't think there's an easy answer. But one thing's for sure, this is a conversation that's just getting started. So thank you all for joining us on this deep dive into the future of aging. Until next time.